It was a dirty play by Alyssa Thomas. She initiated the...
Alyssa Thomas put her fist into Caitlin Clark's throat. Not a basketball play, not an accident, not a hard foul in the flow of competition. A fist to the throat of the most watched player in women's basketball. And the referees on the floor let it go without so much as a whistle. That is the single most important fact you need to hold in your mind for the next 17 minutes. Because everything that follows, the suspension, the flagrant 2, the suspension date, the misinformation storm that erupted on social media within hours of the final buzzer, every single piece of it radiates outward from that one brutal, undeniable, documented moment. Welcome back, this is Rimrun, and today we are pulling back every curtain on the Alyssa Thomas assault on Caitlin Clark. The WNBA's accountability process, the one-game suspension that the league confirmed, the false benching narrative that the internet invented overnight, and what all of it tells us about the environment Caitlin Clark is operating in right now. Sit down, take a breath, because this story is uglier than the final score suggests. The Indiana Fever lost that game, 111-109. The Mercury won, and somewhere in the chaos of a two-point game decided in the final seconds, the moment Alyssa Thomas drove her fist into Caitlin Clark's throat with 6.52 seconds left in the second quarter was almost swallowed whole. Almost, but not quite, because the WNBA's post-game review process exists precisely for moments like this one. Moments where the referees on the floor miss something that the cameras catch in perfect, damning, undeniable clarity. Let me be entirely clear with you about what the league's official statement says, because the language matters. Upon post-game review, Alyssa Thomas of the Phoenix Mercury received a flagrant 2 penalty and a one-game suspension for, and I am reading this directly, recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat of Indiana Fever guard Caitlin Clark. The incident was deemed a non-basketball act. Non-basketball act. That is the specific language the WNBA used. Not an aggressive play, not a basketball foul that got out of hand. A non-basketball act. The league looked at the footage, reviewed the contact, and concluded that what Alyssa Thomas did to Caitlin Clark had nothing to do with the game of basketball. Let that sink in for a second, and here is the part that makes the stomach turn. It happened at the 6.52 mark of the second quarter. Not in the final 30 seconds of a desperate physical game where emotions boil over and bodies collide in the scramble for a win. The second quarter, with more than half the game still to be played. Alyssa Thomas made a calculated decision in the middle of a basketball game to put her fist into another player's throat, and the referees missed it entirely. The WNBA had to go back to the tape the following day to find it. Now, I want every single person watching this video to understand exactly how the league's review process works, because the establishment does not advertise this clearly enough. The WNBA has the authority, following any game, to reclassify a foul that was not called flagrant during live play. They can go back, watch the footage, and upgrade any contact to a flagrant designation, and from there they can impose a fine, a suspension, or both. That process exists because human referees miss things in real time. It is a safety net, and in this case, the safety net caught something genuinely dangerous. Alyssa Thomas will serve her suspension on June 27th, when the Phoenix Mercury play their next game. One game for driving a fist into the throat of a professional athlete during a live WNBA contest. We are going to spend a significant portion of this video interrogating whether that punishment fits what we all watched happen. But first, let me show you something. Because there is a moment in the footage from this game, captured live, in real time, with the arena still buzzing, where someone says out loud exactly what the rest of the sports world was thinking. Don't take my word for it. Here is exactly what was said in real time from the floor of that arena. It was a dirty play by Alyssa Thomas. She initiated the contact. Said it out loud, in real time, from inside the arena. No editing room spin. No 24-hour news cycle softening. No league spokesperson choosing careful words. A dirty play. She initiated the contact. That is the verdict that the people who were physically present at that game arrived at before the WNBA's review process even began. And the league, to its credit in this specific instance, agreed. But here is where this story gets genuinely complicated, and here is where I need you to stay with me, because the conversation around this incident did not stay clean. It did not stay focused on what Alyssa Thomas did. Within hours of the final buzzer, a completely separate narrative began circulating across social media. A narrative that had nothing to do with the flagrant foul, nothing to do with the suspension. and everything to do with manufacturing a new controversy around Caitlin Clark herself. The claim was simple, and it was wrong, that Caitlin Clark had been benched, that her coach had pulled her from the game as a disciplinary measure, that something was broken between the player and the organization. And I want to be surgical about this, because the truth matters more than the outrage. Caitlin Clark was not benched. She was dealing with a back issue. The footage from inside the arena documents it. Her back was hurting her. That is the reality. That is what the people who were actually present at the game observed. But the internet does not wait for the people who were actually present. The internet runs on Twitter screenshots and secondhand takes, and by the time the real story had a chance to surface, the false narrative had already metastasized across 1,000 comment sections and 100 content channels that had never set foot inside that arena. This is the environment Caitlin Clark is operating in. Let me say that again so it lands properly. This is the environment Caitlin Clark is operating in. On one side, she has Alyssa Thomas driving a fist into her throat in the second quarter of a professional basketball game. On the other side, she has a social media ecosystem so desperate for a negative Caitlin Clark story that it will invent one from whole cloth the moment the actual news is not damaging enough. She is being attacked from two directions simultaneously, on the court and in the narrative war. And she has done nothing to deserve either. Now let us talk about the game itself. Because the score and the sequence of events inside that arena tell a story that the final number does not fully capture. The Mercury won, 111-109. It was a 2-point game, and inside that 2-point game there were moments of absolute chaos. Moments where the referees lost control of the environment in ways that should concern everyone who cares about the integrity of this league. We know Kelsey Mitchell fouled out. We know that at a point in the final 2 minutes, the score sat at 103-98, with the Fever chasing. We know that the referees were being booed loudly enough that the arena noise was drowning out the calls being made on the floor. That context matters. It matters because it tells you what kind of game this was. This was not a clean, well-officiated basketball contest where one borderline play happened to slip through. This was a physical, emotional, contested game where the officiating was already under scrutiny before the post-game review revealed that a flagrant 2 foul had been missed entirely. The referees were not on top of this game, and Alyssa Thomas, whether consciously or not, committed the most serious act of the night in a moment when the officials were most likely to miss it. And here is what I want you to think about carefully. The WNBA's post-game review process is the last line of defense. It is the mechanism that catches what the referees on the floor fail to catch in real time. And in this case, it worked. Alyssa Thomas was identified, the contact was upgraded to a flagrant 2, and a suspension was handed down. But the fact that this process had to be invoked at all, the fact that a player drove her fist into another player's throat in the second quarter of a professional basketball game and the referees did not stop play, that is the part of the story that the league's press release cannot fully paper over. I want you to listen closely to something, because there is a second piece of footage from inside that arena that documents exactly the kind of physical environment Caitlin Clark was navigating throughout this entire game, not just in the moment of the flagrant foul, but across the full 40 minutes. This is the clip that tells you this was not an isolated incident. This is the clip that tells you the targeting was systematic. Watch this. I want you to hear it from the floor of that arena.
And I'm here to tell you, she was not benched. I got the footage. I'm going to debunk this whole narrative. You guys can listen to whoever you want to listen to. I was there at the game.
You got 3 Phoenix players around Caitlin Clark. 3 Phoenix Mercury players surrounding 1 Indiana Fever guard. That is not defense. That is not scheme. That is a coordinated physical presence designed to make one specific player's life miserable every single time she touches the ball. Every single time she moves without the ball. Every single time she exists in that building. 3 players around 1. And somewhere inside that 3-on-1 physical environment, Alyssa Thomas found the moment to put her fist into Caitlin Clark's throat. This is the pattern I need you to understand. This is the pattern that the establishment, the people who run the commentary around this league, the people who write the press releases, the people who decide which stories get amplified and which stories get buried, this is the pattern they do not want you to sit with for too long. Because the moment you sit with it, the moment you really absorb what 3 Phoenix players surrounding 1 Fever guard looks like in practice, the Alyssa Thomas suspension stops looking like an isolated disciplinary action and starts looking like the visible tip of a much larger, much more deliberate strategy. Let me walk you through what this means tactically, because I think the tactical conversation is being completely ignored in favor of the outrage cycle. When you deploy 3 players to physically surround a single guard, not to defend a play, not to stop a drive, but to surround a person, you are making a statement. You are telling that player that every possession is going to cost her something. You are telling her that her body is going to absorb contact on every movement in every quarter for 40 minutes. That is an attrition strategy. And Alyssa Thomas's fist to the throat was the most extreme expression of that strategy, but it was not the only expression of it. And now I want to talk about the 1-game suspension, because I think there is a conversation to be had here that most of the commentary around this story is deliberately avoiding. 1 game. Alyssa Thomas drives her fist into Caitlin Clark's throat, contact the league officially classified as a non-basketball act. And the consequence is 1 game. 1. She misses the June 27th game against the Tempo. She comes back the following game, fully eligible, and the Mercury move on. And Caitlin Clark, who absorbed the contact, who played through whatever physical impact that fist to the throat caused, does not get those seconds back, does not get the game back, does not get a guarantee that the next time Alyssa Thomas is on the floor with her, the same thing will not happen again. I am not going to manufacture outrage by inventing a number that proves the punishment is insufficient. I do not need to. The league's own language does it for me. Non-basketball act. That is the standard the WNBA applied. And the consequence for a non-basketball act, for deliberately driving your fist into another player's throat during a professional game, is 1 game. You decide whether that math works. You decide whether that consequence is proportionate to the act. But I want you to make that decision with the full picture in front of you, not the sanitized version that the press release offers. Now, let me address the pattern of behavior more broadly, because Alyssa Thomas's history of physical play is not a secret. The people who follow this league closely know that Thomas plays with an edge that regularly crosses lines. The people who watch these games closely know that the contact she generates, the screens, the post play, the defensive positioning, consistently pushes the boundaries of what is legal and what is not. This was not the first time her physicality has generated controversy. It will not be the last. And the question the league needs to answer, the question the league has been conspicuously unwilling to answer loudly enough, is whether 1 game is a deterrent or whether it is simply a cost of doing business for a player willing to operate the way Alyssa Thomas operates. Because here is the brutal reality of the deterrent question. If a player calculates that the worst-case consequence for a non-basketball act of physical aggression is a single missed game, 1 game in a league season, then the deterrent effect of that punishment is essentially 0. You are telling every player in the WNBA that the price of putting your fist into Caitlin Clark's throat is 1 game. 1. And if you are a team that believes physically intimidating Caitlin Clark gives you a competitive advantage, if you believe that surrounding her with 3 players and absorbing the occasional flagrant call is a viable strategy, then a 1-game suspension does not change your calculus at all. It is a rounding error. It is noise. I want to be precise about something here, because precision matters in this conversation. The WNBA's review process caught what the referees missed. That is the system working as designed. The league reviewed the footage, identified the contact, upgraded the designation, and imposed a suspension. That is accountability. But accountability and deterrence are not the same thing. You can hold someone accountable for an action without creating a consequence severe enough to prevent the next person from taking the same action. And right now, the WNBA is doing the former without adequately addressing the latter. And while we are talking about what the league is and is not doing adequately, let me address the misinformation problem directly. Because the false benching narrative, the claim that Caitlin Clark was disciplined by her own team, pulled from the game as punishment for some unspecified infraction, did not emerge from a vacuum. It emerged from a social media environment that is actively hostile to Caitlin Clark's success, that is actively searching for any evidence of dysfunction around her, and that is willing to manufacture that evidence when the real story is not damaging enough. And that environment is not an accident. It is cultivated, it is fed, and the people feeding it, the accounts, the content creators, the commentators who ran with the benching story without verifying a single frame of footage, they bear responsibility for the damage that false narrative caused. Here is what the footage actually shows. Caitlin Clark was dealing with a back issue. Her back was hurting her. That is the documented reality from people who were physically present at the game. Not a disciplinary benching, not a coaching decision rooted in conflict. A physical issue, a back problem, in a player who has been absorbing contact at an extraordinary rate across this season. And the fact that the internet chose to run with the more inflammatory, more damaging, more dishonest version of that story. The fact that the benching narrative spread faster and wider than the factual account tells you everything you need to know about the information environment Caitlin Clark is navigating every single day. And here is the clip that makes this point undeniable. Here is the moment where the false narrative gets corrected by someone who was actually there, inside the arena, watching the game in real time, with access to footage the Twitter commentariat never saw. Don't take my word for it. Here is exactly what the eyewitness account says.
It was a dirty play by Alyssa Thomas. She initiated the...
She was not benched. Caitlin Clark's back was hurting her. There it is, from someone who was present, who had the footage, who waited to see what narrative the internet was going to run with, and then corrected it with documented evidence. She was not benched. Her back was hurting her. The entire manufactured controversy, the entire storm of speculation and accusation that erupted on social media within hours of the final buzzer, collapses in 11 seconds of eyewitness testimony from someone who was actually in that building. And I need you to sit with the implications of that for a moment, because they are genuinely alarming. We live in an information environment where a false narrative about Caitlin Clark can travel from a Twitter screenshot to 1,000 comment sections in the time it takes someone who was actually at the game to pull up their footage and document the truth. We live in an information environment where the burden of proof falls on the people defending Caitlin Clark, where the people inventing damaging stories about her face no accountability, no correction mechanism, no consequence for spreading documented falsehoods, while the people doing the actual journalism of attending games, watching footage, and reporting what they observed are playing catch-up against a fire hose of misinformation. That is the second arena Caitlin Clark is fighting in, and it is every bit as hostile as the physical environment Alyssa Thomas created on the court. Let me now render a verdict on each of the threads this story has opened, because I think clarity matters more than ambiguity in a moment like this one. On the Alyssa Thomas suspension, the WNBA made the right call. The contact was real, it was documented, it was classified correctly as a non-basketball act, and the suspension was imposed. The process worked. The outcome is appropriate in that it acknowledges what happened. Whether it is sufficient as a deterrent is a separate question, and the answer to that question depends entirely on whether the league is willing to escalate consequences the next time a similar act occurs. One game is the baseline. The next incident, if there is one, needs to carry a significantly heavier consequence, or the baseline becomes the ceiling, and the ceiling is not high enough. On the game itself, the Indiana Fever lost by 2 points in a game where the officiating was already under scrutiny before the post-game review revealed a missed flagrant 2. That context does not change the outcome on the scoreboard. The Mercury won, but it does raise legitimate questions about whether the physical environment in that game was properly managed from the opening tip, and whether a better officiated game produces the same final score. Those questions do not have clean answers, but they are worth asking, loudly, in the public conversation around this league. On Caitlin Clark's back issue, the documented evidence says she was not benched. She was dealing with a physical problem, and the fact that a back issue in a player who has been absorbing extraordinary physical contact across an entire season is being treated as a footnote, rather than as a serious medical concern that the league and the franchise should be actively monitoring and protecting, is itself a story. Caitlin Clark's body is taking punishment. The flagrant 2 from Alyssa Thomas is the most visible example of that punishment. But it is not the only example. It is not even close to the only example. And here is the prediction I am going to stake publicly, right now on this channel, so you can come back and hold me to it. The next time the Phoenix Mercury and the Indiana Fever share a floor, the physical intensity of that game is going to be the dominant storyline before the opening tip. It is going to be the thing every analyst, every commentator, every arena full of fans is thinking about from the moment the rosters are announced. And Alyssa Thomas, who will have returned from her one-game suspension by that point, fully eligible, presumably unchanged in her approach to the game, is going to face a level of scrutiny that she has never faced before in her professional career. Every contact she initiates, every screen she sets, every defensive possession where her body comes near Caitlin Clark is going to be watched by every official in that building with a level of attention that simply did not exist before June 25th. That is the real consequence of what happened. Not just the one-game suspension, not just the flagrant 2 designation, but the permanent shift in how Alyssa Thomas is perceived and officiated for the remainder of this season and potentially beyond. She has bought herself a reputation. She has bought herself a target. And the next time she crosses a line, if she crosses a line, the consequences are not going to be absorbed quietly by a post-game review process. They are going to be called in real time, on the floor, in front of a full arena, with the entire basketball world watching. The second prediction. The misinformation campaign around Caitlin Clark is not going to slow down. It is going to accelerate. Because the benching story failed. It was corrected, it was debunked, the footage contradicted it, and the people who ran with it are not going to learn a lesson from that correction. They are going to find the next angle, the next screenshot, the next moment of ambiguity they can weaponize into a damaging narrative. And the only defense against that campaign is exactly what happened here. People who are actually present at these games, with actual footage, doing the actual work of documenting what they observe and correcting the record before the false narrative has time to calcify into conventional wisdom. The third prediction. Caitlin Clark is going to be fine. Let me say that clearly because the doom and gloom narrative around her, the narrative that frames every physical challenge she faces, every game her team loses, every back issue she manages as evidence of some larger collapse, is as false as the benching story. She is a professional athlete in the prime of her career, playing for a franchise that is building around her, in a league that has just demonstrated, imperfectly, but demonstrably, that it will hold players accountable for non-basketball acts of aggression against her. The system is not perfect. The deterrence is not sufficient. The information environment is hostile. But Caitlin Clark, right now, today, is still on the floor, still playing, still the most watched player in women's basketball. And no amount of fists to the throat or false benching narratives is going to change that fundamental reality. Because here is what the footage from inside that arena ultimately shows you if you watch it with clear eyes. You see 3 Phoenix players surrounding one Fever guard. You see a fist driven into a throat that the referees missed in real time. You see a crowd booing loud enough to drown out the officials. And you see Caitlin Clark still in that building, still competing, still drawing the attention of every camera in the arena. 3 players around one. And she is still the story. She is still the reason people are watching. She is still the player that opposing teams have to design entire physical strategies around just to slow her down. And even then, the game goes to the final buzzer, 2 points separating the teams, with the outcome in genuine doubt until the last seconds. That is not a player who is being broken by the environment she is navigating. That is a player who is proving, game by game, that the environment cannot break her. And Alyssa Thomas's 1-game suspension is the league's acknowledgement, however inadequate, however belated, however insufficient as a deterrent, that what happened to Caitlin Clark on June 24th was wrong. It was a non-basketball act, it was documented, it was punished, and the people responsible for it are now on record. The establishment does not always get this right. The old guard of WNBA officiating and league discipline has a long history of letting physical aggression slide, of treating the post-game review process as a bureaucratic formality rather than a genuine accountability mechanism. But in this specific instance, on this specific play, with this specific player on the receiving end of this specific fist, the system caught what it was supposed to catch. And that matters. It is not enough, but it matters. Caitlin Clark is going to lace up for the next game. She is going to walk onto that floor with a back that has been bothering her and a throat that absorbed a fist in the second quarter of the previous game, and she is going to compete. That is who she is. That is what the footage shows, every single time. And the people who are counting on the physical environment, the misinformation campaigns, and the relentless manufactured controversy to eventually wear her down are going to be waiting a very long time. Before I let you go, I need to ask you a direct question, because this is the conversation this story demands. Do you believe a 1-game suspension is a sufficient consequence for a documented, non-basketball act of physical aggression, a fist to the throat of a professional athlete during a live game? Or do you believe the WNBA needs to establish a significantly higher baseline for this category of offense? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Not what do you think about Caitlin Clark? Not who do you think wins the next game? This specific question, is 1 game enough? Because that answer has consequences for every player in this league, not just Caitlin Clark. And the league office reads the temperature of this conversation. Your voice in that comment section is part of how that temperature gets measured. If this video gave you something to think about, if the story we just documented landed the way it deserves to land, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to Rimrun if you are not already here, because we are not done with this story. The back issue, the next Mercury Fever matchup, the league's disciplinary track record. There is more coming, and you do not want to be the person who missed it because they forgot to hit the bell. Tap the notification bell, turn it to all. We will see you on the next one.
And I'm here to tell you, she was not bench. I got the footage. I'm going to debunk this whole narrative. You guys can listen to whoever you want to listen to. I was there at the game.